It's early morning on Monday, December 2, 2024. In a quiet cul-de-sac in Widnes, Cheshire, dawn is just breaking, but blue lights are already cutting through the stillness. Armed officers from the National Crime Agency, backed by local police, move up the driveway of a semi-detached house. The shutters rattle against the window frames. Inside, Paul Green, 59, who for years operated in the shadows under the nickname The Big Fella, is woken by the heavy stomp of boots and the sharp calls of officers announcing themselves. A few moments later, he's marched out in handcuffs. Flanked by two officers, he's jolted into custody. In the blink of an eye, a carefully hidden world worth billions, spanning countries and cities, begins to unravel. Green's arrest at that early hour was the climax of years of investigation. At the time, few people outside law enforcement knew his name, but behind the domestic facade of that house, investigators say he had spent years orchestrating a sophisticated drug smuggling operation that brought illegal drugs into the United Kingdom on an industrial level, hidden among everyday goods and embedded deep in global freight networks. Within weeks, it became clear this was not just another gang. This was the largest drug smuggling conspiracy ever detected in the UK, involving multiple countries, dozens of operatives, and drug shipments with an estimated street value of up to £7 billion. As Green was led into custody that morning, detectives were already preparing charges against him and a long list of associates. Prosecutors would later explain that the plan was straightforward in its ambition, but extraordinarily complex in its execution. Bring huge quantities of heroin, cocaine, amphetamines, and cannabis from continental Europe into Britain, conceal them in plain sight, and distribute them through loyal networks and organized crime groups, OCGs, across the country. From the outset of the trial at Manchester Crown Court, the scale of the operation was clear. Prosecutors said the conspiracy ran from about March 2016 until September 2018, with Green at the center as the principal negotiator and coordinator. Despite only 6 drug seizures being made by authorities during that period, investigators were able to prove that at least 240 consignments of illegal drugs had entered the UK under the network's control, often with up to 4 smuggling attempts each week. The organization Green built was not a loose group of street dealers. It was a structured, hierarchical network with clearly defined roles, spanning the Netherlands and across England. Green was the point of contact for numerous organized crime groups who paid a fee to use his smuggling routes. He did not bundle drugs into his own van at port entrances. Instead, he ran a logistics-style operation capable of accommodating multiple OCGs seeking to move drugs at scale. Among the most important individuals within this network was Stephen Martin, 53, of Chorley Old Road, Bolton. Prosecutors described Martin as Green's right-hand man. Martin's primary role was financial. He organized the flow of money that paid for the shipment of drugs, financed front companies, and moved proceeds of the operation through bank accounts that had been set up under false or stolen identities. Martin, who was imprisoned for 28 years, was central to preserving the network's cash flow mechanisms and shielding transactions from scrutiny. Another key figure was Mohammed Ovaez, 46, of Bournley Avenue in Burnage, Manchester. Ovaez oversaw distribution once the drugs reached Britain. While Green managed the supply chain from endpoint to endpoint, Ovaez controlled how product was disseminated to local networks and organized crime groups throughout the north of England and beyond. He was convicted of conspiracy to import drugs and sentenced to 27 years in prison. Prosecutors also identified several other high-level operatives. Russell Leonard, 48, from Grosmont Road in Kirkby, Liverpool, was described as a key foot soldier who, among other tasks, spoke fluent Dutch and often handled packaging and movement of shipments at the European end. Leonard received a 24-year sentence. On the continental side of the operation, prosecutors pointed to several Dutch conspirators. Johannes Vesters, 54, and Barbara Reinbout, 53, both from Utrecht, were convicted for their roles in facilitating and coordinating smuggling from the Netherlands to the UK, with Vesters receiving a 20-year sentence and Reinbout 18 years. A warehouse in Uithoorn in the northern Netherlands was just one of a network of locations where drugs were stored and concealed before export. Beyond those leading roles, the organization employed at least a dozen other individuals whose contributions ranged from logistical support to identity fraud, document creation, and the management of front companies. In some instances, conspirators used cloned business identities and falsified accounts to rent warehouses and open bank accounts that appeared legitimate to suppliers, transport companies, and financial institutions. This level of organization required elaborate planning and disciplined execution. One of the operation's signature smuggling methods was both bold and deceptively simple. Instead of using hidden compartments or fast boats, the gang hid illegal drugs inside pallets of strong-smelling produce such as onions, garlic, and ginger. The use of produce was not accidental. The strong smell helped mask the scent of drugs from detection dogs and kept many shipments from raising suspicion during routine customs checks. Innocent haulage companies were contracted to transport these pallets from the Netherlands into the UK under the pretense that they were delivering legitimate fresh produce. In one court example, consignments were packed with so much vegetable matter that between 40 and 50 tons of onions a week were being purchased and shipped across the channel. On more than one occasion, the gang could not unload all the produce and simply shipped it back to Europe to maintain cover. At the Dutch end, conspirators used warehouses and rented facilities where shipments were prepared and packed. In at least one instance, cocaine was hidden among 4 cardboard boxes packed with ginger before being shipped to warehouses the crew controlled in Bolton, Wigan, and Ormskirk. At other points, the network used rented storage space in places like Leeds, Preston, Sheffield, and Warrington, showing how widespread its logistical footprint had become. The operation was not without mistakes. In September 2016, an innocent Dutch haulage driver employed to deliver a consignment became suspicious of a shipment. He returned to his depot and alerted authorities, leading to the discovery of 8 1-kilogram bricks of cocaine hidden inside. In October 2016, a separate attempt to move 57 kilograms of amphetamine worth about $1.1 million was foiled when Dutch police, who were already monitoring members of the network, arrested 2 men who had left the van unattended after an all-night drinking session in Amstelveen, a suburb of Amsterdam. One of those arrested was Russell Leonard. Encrypted communications played a significant part in how the gang operated. Investigators recovered messages from Green's encrypted phone, where he used the handler name Duck Farmer to coordinate shipments, communicate instructive details, and manage problems as they arose. These messages later became critical prosecution evidence, showing not just movement of shipments, but Green's central role in authorizing and directing operations. The network also went to great lengths to keep its traces hidden. Green sometimes rented a hotel room near his Widnes home so he could access its Wi-Fi rather than use his own network, making his communications harder to trace directly back to him. Identity fraud was widespread. Conspirators changed names by deed poll, stole the identities of innocent individuals, and cloned legitimate businesses to create convincing cover for purchases, rentals, and financial transactions. Law enforcement's response to the conspiracy was methodical and exhaustive. The case became the longest-running criminal trial in British history. The first trial alone lasted 23 months at Manchester Crown Court, with jurors hearing weeks of evidence on the structure and function of the smuggling conspiracy before reaching verdicts. The National Crime Agency, NCA, led the investigation, working closely with Dutch police and other European partners to track movements, intercept communications, and piece together the network's multinational structure. The investigation identified hundreds of suspect shipments, traced front companies, and documented the flow of money that supported the operation. In addition to illegal drugs, the prosecution showed how the gang even used legitimate import-export terminology to hide their activities, disguising illegal consignments among paperwork for imported produce and making them look routine to unsuspecting transport firms. In one example, Green's organization tried to smuggle amphetamines hidden in bottles of cream bought in Belgium, relying on falsified paperwork to justify the shipment. Over time, investigators were able to intercept around 450 kilograms of cocaine and heroin and 2 tons of cannabis across seizures at UK ports, including Killingholme and Immingham in Lincolnshire, and locations in the Netherlands. Green's arrest in December 2024 marked the beginning of the end for the network. When Judge Paul Lawton delivered sentences at Manchester Crown Court, he emphasized not only the scale of the criminal enterprise, but also the social harm it caused. The judge told defendants that while the physical importation of drugs was a crime, the wider damage caused by addiction, social degradation, and violence in communities across the UK was incalculable. One tragic example prosecutors cited was the violent death of John Kinsella, a Merseyside mob enforcer who was shot dead in May 2018 while walking his dogs with his pregnant partner. The judge linked such violence to the broader network of organized crime groups that relied on Green's drug shipments. For his role as Kingpin, Paul Green received a 32-year prison sentence for conspiracy to import drugs and fraud by false representation. Stephen Martin was jailed for 28 years, Mohammed Ovais for 27 years, and Russell Leonard for 24 years. Dutch conspirators Johannes Vesters and Barbara Reinbout received 20-year and 18-year sentences respectively, while other members drew significant terms ranging downwards. A few lesser participants received suspended sentences or short terms, depending on their level of involvement. Beyond the prison terms, prosecutors and law enforcement praised the collaboration between the NCA and Dutch authorities, saying that without that level of joint work, the true scale and complexity of the operation might never have been exposed. The case showed how organized crime networks can embed themselves deep within legitimate commercial systems, using legal channels and everyday freight to move contraband on a massive scale. The Paul Green case will be studied not just for its scale, but for what it revealed about how modern drug trafficking can adapt, exploit supply chains, and blend illegal activity with legitimate commerce. From the early morning raid in Widnes to the final sentencing in Manchester, the prosecution dismantled a vast and highly organized conspiracy that had entangled dozens of people across borders. The conviction of Paul Green and his network sent a clear message that even the most elaborate criminal enterprises can be exposed and disrupted by patient, persistent law enforcement and international cooperation. Thank you for watching and spending your time on this case. It's a powerful example of how organized crime can grow and operate in plain sight for years. I'd really like to hear what you think, so please continue the conversation in the comments and share your views. Let me know what stories or cases you'd like to see covered next. If you found this useful, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell so you don't miss future uploads.